If you need an ambulance tonight, you may wait 19 or even longer minutes. For years, CBS 2 investigator Pam Zekman has reported on slow ambulance response times.
The question is, are they getting any faster? After all, last year, Chicago added several more ambulances, and tonight Pam's asking, have they made a difference?
These 5 ambulances are going to create a very positive impact on this system. Yes, it will address response times.
That was last summer, the Chicago Fire Department adding 5 new rigs after a series of stories by CBS 2 investigators. The fleet was up to 80 ambulances, a victory, but not for everyone.
100 was the number we felt we needed.
Paramedic Field Chief Patrick Fitzmaurice has criticized the fire department for years for not adding more ambulances.
It was putting a Band-Aid on a wound that needed a tourniquet.
Was it? We compared ambulance response times provided by the Office of Emergency Management for 4 months before the new ambulances were added to the same 4 months after the addition, more than 200,000 lines of data. And we found that the average response times improved just 4 seconds after the new ambulances were added.
That's a big number if you're, running in an Olympic race. That's probably a good number, but it's insignificant as far as we go.
What's more, response times were supposed to be helped when the University of Chicago opened its trauma center last spring, because ambulances would not have to travel as far for critical runs. But again, the data shows only an incremental improvement, and we're still finding unacceptable response times. Remember, the state standard is 6 minutes.
We called the ambulance and we waited.
She doesn't want her identity shown, but we've documented that it took 19 minutes for an ambulance to arrive last month when her 83-year-old grandmother fell and lost consciousness. When the paramedics finally arrived, what did they say?
They first apologized for taking so long.
A tense wait for the family.
She can be unconscious for God knows how long, or she can be bleeding. We didn't know what was going on with her.
And in another case, a man walked into Engine Company 99's house suffering from chest pains. The problem? There was no ambulance. It took 12 minutes for Ambulance 23 to come from a different house and take the patient to a hospital.
It could be life or death.
Our analysis reveals most ambulances go on 10 runs in a 24-hour period, but the busiest ambulances can have up to 18 runs a day.
The other day when all the ice was falling, you had ambulances flying into downtown from all over the city.
At the current fleet level of 80 ambulances, Chicago ranks last in number of ambulances per 100,000 people when compared to other big cities. But if Chicago added 20 more rigs, the number of ambulances per 100,000 people jumps to 3.7, meeting national norms. Indeed, a recent report for the Chicago Paramedics Union agreed with Fitzmaurice and others, saying the Chicago Fire Department needs to bring its fleet up to 100 ambulances. And in 2015, the Chicago Inspector General issued a report criticizing the fire department for not properly tracking response times.
We said the analysis needed to be done. They needed to make better use of their data. They needed to account for what they were doing with their data.
Now the fire department says the data we analyzed from the OEMC is unreliable. And they say so is the data used by the Inspector General and the Paramedics Union in their reports calling for more ambulances.
This is an egregious shell game at this point in time. Everybody else is wrong. They're right, but they can't explain why they're right. It's reckless, it's irresponsible, it's spin, it's a shell game.
The fire department claims they will be issuing their own report on response times in the next couple of months, a report we've been waiting on for years. The fire department is saying you can't rely on OEMC numbers.
Of course they do. Of course they do. Their job is to point you in a different direction.
They have to do something about this. It's not fair, especially living in such a big city, which is Chicago.
The fire department says it is now manually reviewing data to identify discrepancies, technical issues, or operating errors. And until that's done, it cannot verify the accuracy of response time data. All that will take at least 45 days, an official said. Meanwhile, the Inspector General is calling on the Chicago City Council to hold hearings on ambulance response times. They can force fire department officials to finally answer some questions. No one from the fire department would do an on-camera interview for our story. Rob and Erica.
You've been very busy. We understand you have an update on another big story you're following here, Pam.
I do. I have the head of the Chicago Police Department today finally responding to my reports that a serial killer could be on the loose in Chicago. Superintendent Eddie Johnson says they can use new DNA testing to see if they can crack any of the 50 unsolved strangulations and bring a killer to justice.
We're looking at them now to see if we can go back and do some additional testing to see if that will help us bring to the forefront who these individuals are. But absent that, we simply still don't have enough evidence to suggest that they're serial killers.
A criminal researcher believes that 50 unsolved female strangulations could be the work of one or more serial killers. A pattern shows the murders occurring on the south, far south, and west sides of the city. The first murder was in 2001. The latest in the pattern occurred just last fall. The superintendent is also asking for anybody with information about these cases to contact police. And Rob and Erica, we do have a map on our website where you can look at the various places that people's bodies were found, and you can find out details about the cases, their names, who they were, what happened.
Yeah, great resource. Thank you, Pam.